Hello all gymnastics movers, and welcome back to the second episode of my Gymnastics Foundation series. This is the series where I help you increase your strength and your mobility using gymnastics training. This will help you build the foundation that you need to learn more advanced skills such as the handstand, the V-sit, the front lever, and all of those cool, amazing skills that you see people do on Instagram and YouTube. This is where it all starts. If you're new here, my name is Sid. I'm an online and private gymnastics coach who specializes in helping adults get stronger, more flexible, and learn skills using gymnastics training. In this episode, I am going to teach you everything from A to Z when it comes to learning the push-ups. You are then going to be able to apply this to your own training to optimize your performance, your health, and your longevity. So let's start with the question, what is a push-up? Well, we have all seen a push-up in some shape or form. It's a universal exercise that is used in almost every discipline and sport to build basic and fundamental pushing strength. Now you might be thinking, why is everyone doing push-ups? And the answer is that it's simply a great exercise. The push-up is a horizontal pushing exercise that primarily targets the chest, triceps, and shoulders, but this is going to depend on which variation you do. Now, why do so many people use the push-ups and why do so many people train it? Well, in gymnastics we use the push-ups very frequently, and we use it primarily for three different reasons. We use it to develop general strength, we use it to develop specific strength skills, and we use it to teach fundamental basic body positions. The first thing we use the push-ups for is to increase our general strength, and this is simply the process where we develop basic strength and control for the basic exercises and basic movements. At this stage of our training, we are also using the push-ups to increase our joint integrity, and we want to strengthen the connective tissue so that our joints are able to handle all of the advanced exercises that we're going to do in the future. The second reason we use the push-ups is to develop specific strength skills such as the handstand push-ups. Now the handstand push-up, of course, is a vertical pressing skill where the push-up is a horizontal, but the technique of the push-ups is still very much the same, and we can use that technique and transfer it over to the handstand push-ups. The third use of the push-ups is to develop basic body positions, and in this case it's the plank and the hollow body position. When the push-up is performed correctly, you are forced to be in a proper hollow body position, and having this control is something that is going to transfer over to other exercises such as the planche. So it's a very basic and fundamental movement, but it's still going to transfer over to the more advanced exercises. Now, even though the push-ups has all of these advantages, there are some downsides to the push-ups. And let's take a look at what I think is the number one issue with the push-ups. The biggest issue with the push-ups is that they become too easy too quickly. And most people tend to just add on more repetitions, but this is not going to increase the intensity of the exercise, so your strength gains are going to be limited. And yes, of course, you're going to build up more conditioning and more muscular conditioning, but that for most people is not the goal. Most people want to get stronger, and if we want to get stronger, we must increase the intensity of the exercise. There are several ways that you can increase the intensity and the difficulty of your push-ups without increasing the repetitions. So let's take a look at some of the ways that you can increase the difficulty of your push-ups once you have mastered the basic standard push-ups. The first option is to add weight, and this is simply done by placing a weight on your back or using a dip belt to attach a weight around your waist, which you can then use to gradually increase the weight over time, which is going to result in you getting stronger. Now the second option would be to add some kind of resistance to your push-ups. Now this could be, for example, you having a partner pushing you down and then resisting you on the way up. That is going to increase the intensity of the exercise, and the partner can then adjust the intensity by how hard they are pushing you down. The third option is to decrease the leverage in your push-ups by leaning further forward with your shoulders over your wrists. And this would be what we call in gymnastics a pseudo-planche push-up, or simply a planche push-up. The fourth option is to do the push-ups on rings. The rings are going to add an element of instability, and this is going to make the push-ups a bit harder in the beginning. But then of course on the rings as well, you should gradually add weights to make the exercise more difficult. Now in gymnastics training we are almost obsessed with making every single exercise perfect, and we make sure that every single repetition is perfect 10 out of 10, and this can be a great thing, but it can also be a bad thing in some cases. Now one of the good things is of course that you're going to learn the proper technique from the beginning. Another good thing is that you're going to reduce the risk of injury because you're using proper technique, you're using a slow and controlled tempo, and you're not doing any drastic movements. The third good thing is that you teach the body to work with the muscle groups that you want to work with on each specific exercise, and you reduce the amount of compensation from other muscle groups by utilizing the proper technique and form on each exercise. The downside to using this perfect technique approach is that sometimes we don't give the body the overload that it needs to get stronger, and this is simply because as soon as our form starts to break down, we quit the exercise, we quit the set, because we can't use that proper form anymore. But the downside of course is that we don't overload the body enough for it to grow stronger. But it's important for you to know that perfect technique is something we are striving for in the long term. It's not something that you need to do every single session, every set, every rep. That is simply not necessary. You need to think of it more as a journey, and over time you are going to improve your technique just as you're going to get stronger. Now of course your form can't be horrible. If you choose a very difficult exercise and you're not yet capable of doing it, then of course your form is going to break down, and that might be an indication that this exercise is too difficult for you. And this might be a scenario where you have to go back one step to an easier progression to allow you to use proper form. Now let's get into the nitty-gritty details of how to perform the push-ups. These are some of the standard and basic techniques that I like to follow when I do the push-ups, and I would consider these the fundamentals, and if you can't do these things properly, then I would recommend that you choose an easier progression before you move on with your push-ups. External rotation. You want to achieve external rotation by placing the hands with the fingers pointed forwards or slightly out to the side. You want to think about keeping the arms straight and rotate the elbow pits forward. And by using this hand position and rotating the elbow pits forward, you are going to force the shoulders into external rotation. And in the beginning I prefer to work mainly with external rotation, and I try to avoid internal rotation, or where you see the hands going inwards and the elbows flaring out to the side. And the reason is I have found that generally beginners don't have the prerequisite strength or flexibility in their shoulder internal rotation to perform push-ups in that manner. Elbows tucked in. You want to keep the elbows tucked in close to the body. They don't need to be all the way in, but you don't want the elbows to flare out too much to the side. By placing the elbows within your scapular plane, you will be able to perform the push-ups with less strain on the shoulders, and the shoulders are going to have more room to move properly. But this is just a generalization based on all of the people that I have coached and training myself. I have always found it very painful, and it doesn't really feel good in the shoulder to keep the elbows flared out too much. Now, it doesn't apply to everyone, but for this video I'm going to recommend that you keep the elbows tucked in, but it's also a personal preference. With many exercises it's very natural to look down because it feels more comfortable to not look forward. But the problem with this, especially with push-ups, is that your body is going to follow your eyes. So if you look down, your body is going to curve and you're going to get a bit too much of a hollow position, which is going to limit your range of motion. So what you want to do instead is you want to keep the eyes looking slightly forward, and by tilting the head up, you're going to straighten out your chest, and you're going to get a bit of a better position to allow for more range of motion and a more proper push-up. In the push-ups, the position of your scapula or your shoulder position is going to be very important to make the exercise safe and to improve your performance. So for your push-ups, you want to think about two things when it comes to your scapula position. You want to keep the shoulders in a neutral position between retraction and protraction, and you also want to keep the shoulders depressed. When I say neutral between retraction and protraction, I mean that you don't want to go into a fully protracted position, especially during the push-up, because that is going to limit your range of motion. And you also don't want to allow the shoulders to collapse completely, because that is not going to be a safe position for your scapula. So you want to find kind of that middle ground in between retraction and protraction. But most importantly of all, you don't want to allow the shoulders to collapse. For your scapula depression, the most important thing is that you avoid letting the shoulders shrug up towards your ears, because this is not a position where your scapula is engaged. It's simply going to relax in this humped forward posture. So what you want to do instead is you want to pull the shoulders down into a depressed position, and this is going to allow the scapula to be more engaged, and it's also going to allow the lats and some of the muscles on your back side to help with your push-ups. Posterior pelvic tilt. You want to go into posterior pelvic tilt, or PPT, by tilting the pelvis forwards, engaging your abs and squeezing your glutes. This is going to be the opposite of anterior pelvic tilt, or APT, where you tilt the pelvis backwards and you go into a arched position. You need to maintain this posterior pelvic tilt, or PPT, during your push-ups, and if you cannot maintain this position, that can be an indication that either you are doing a push-up variation that is too hard, or you lack the control of your core to maintain that position. Elbows on top of the wrists. You want to make sure that when you are performing your push-ups, that your elbows are going to be stacked over the wrists. A very common problem is that people tend to not lean forward enough during their push-ups, because the further you lean forward, the more difficult it gets, and the further you lean back, the easier it gets. So make sure that you lean far enough forward with the shoulders by keeping track of your elbow, and make sure that it's stacked over the wrists. If you're struggling with this, something you can do is to place two objects behind your elbows during the push-ups, and what this is going to do is it's going to force you to lean forward, otherwise you're going to knock the objects down. So that can be a good cue and little technique you can use to make sure that you lean far enough forward in your push-ups. Those are the main things that you want to think about when you perform your push-ups, and that is what's going to give you the most bang for your buck. But there are also some smaller details you can focus on, such as pointing your toes and making sure your legs are straight. But focus on these basic techniques first and take the details later. So that was all of the do's for your push-ups. Now let's take a look at the don'ts for your push-up training. Number one is letting the elbows flare out to the side. Like I mentioned before, I have found it less stable and it can be less safe for the shoulders to let the elbows flare out to the side. I also noticed that many people find it very discomforting in the shoulder to perform the push-ups in this manner. Number two is letting the scapula collapse. When you allow the scapula to collapse and you're not working actively to maintain the position, you're going to have a less stable position. You're not going to get assistance from the scapula during your push-ups, and a lot of that pressure and stress is going to go right into your shoulders, and that can also cause some discomfort or pain. Number three is not working actively with your hands and fingers. Just like when you're walking or standing, your feet are your support to the floor. When you're performing push-ups, your best support are going to be your fingers and your hands. So it's very important that you work actively with the hands and fingers, and my cue is always to slightly try to grip the floor with your fingertips, and that is going to allow your fingers, wrist and forearms to activate and better support you during your push-ups. Otherwise, it's very likely that you will experience some wrist pain because the wrist is going to take all of that pressure. Number 4 is an arched back or lack of body tension. When you don't have good body tension during your push-ups, it's very likely that your back is going to start to arch, and like we said before, that is not an optimal position for your push-ups and is usually an indication that something is lacking either in strength or control. Number 5 is keeping the head tucked in. So when you look down towards the floor, your upper back is going to follow. You're going to get a very hollow position, and this is going to limit your range of motion, and it's not going to be a very safe and protective position for your neck. Number 6 is using a tempo that is too fast. Many people like to do their push-ups very quickly because it makes it easier. But we don't want things to be easy, we want to make it hard. So make sure that you do your push-ups with a slow and controlled tempo. You can always do fast and explosive on the way up, but I recommend that you go slow and controlled on the way down. Those are some of the most common mistakes that I see people do when they perform their push-ups. Now let's get into some of the progressions that you can use to develop your push-ups with proper form and technique. The first progression are going to be incline push-ups. For this progression, we are going to elevate our hands on a box, bench, parallettes or whatever you need to take off some of the load and make it easier so you can learn the push-ups with proper technique from the beginning. So you will simply start very high, where you are able to perform the push-ups quite easily, and then gradually over time you want to decrease the height of the object that you use so that you gradually over time get stronger and work your way towards the floor. The second progression are going to be eccentric push-ups. Now this variation you can do on all of the progressions depending on where you need it. So an eccentric push-up is simply where you go down slow through the eccentric part of the movement or on the way down, and then you use assistance to come back up, and then you repeat that eccentric for a number of sets and reps. And where you want to use the eccentric push-ups is simply where you are not yet able to perform normal eccentric and concentric push-ups. So for example, if you're taking the step from parallettes to the floor, and you can do the push-ups on the parallettes but you're not yet able to do them on the floor, a good progression in between could be eccentric push-ups on the floor, and that could help kind of bridge the progression so that you can build up the strength, get some volume in to later do the full push-ups on floor. The third progression is going to be standard push-ups on the floor. This is going to be the very basic and fundamental push-up variation. This should be the goal for everyone who watches this video. And once you have developed these properly, you can then move on to some more advanced and fun push-up variations. Progression number 4 is going to be decline push-ups. So this is going to be the opposite of incline push-ups. So instead of elevating our hands, we are going to elevate our feet. And this is going to make the exercise a lot harder depending on how high you elevate the feet. So just like with incline push-ups, you want to elevate gradually. Start low, and then gradually over time you want to increase the height until you get to about hip height or somewhere around there. Because you don't want to go too high, because then it's going to turn into more of a handstand push-up, which is going to be a different video. And the fifth progression, and the last one for this video, is going to be elevated push-ups. For this exercise, we're going to use a combination of the decline push-ups with the feet elevated, but then we are also going to elevate our hands using a box or parallettes. By elevating the hands, you're going to increase your range of motion, or at least you're going to be able to go into a deeper push-up. By increasing the range of motion, you're going to get stronger within a larger range of motion, and you're also going to increase your flexibility because you're going to get a very good stretch in the chest and biceps in the bottom position because you go into full shoulder extension. So this is really a great exercise to get both stronger and more flexible in your upper body. This should be your main priority in the training right now if you want to develop your push-ups. But then there are also some accessory exercises you can use to further improve your push-ups, but those are going to be just some accessory exercises, which means that they are going to be a complement, so they're not going to be your main exercises. Having control of your scapula is one of the key components to a proper push-up. So adding in some scapular stability and strengthening exercises can be beneficial to improve your push-ups in the long term. This could be anything from scapula push-ups to some banded scapula variations. Like we mentioned before, having control over the hollow body position is one of the key aspects to your push-ups. So one thing that you can do to indirectly improve your push-ups is to improve your hollow body position. And this is easily done by practicing what we call the hollow body hold. There are many variations you can do of the hollow body hold, but the key aspect is simply to press the lower back into the floor and get stronger in this position. You could then do it in a tuck, an extended, or a full hollow body hold. With any dynamic exercise, it's also important to have control over the static positions within that exercise. And in the push-ups, we are going to have the top position, which is the plank, and we're going to have the bottom position when we are in the deepest position of our push-up. So one of the things that you can do to further improve your push-ups and your control within the push-ups is to spend time working on those two positions. So that means spending some time in a proper plank and also spending some time holding the bottom position of your push-ups. Now these three are some of the accessory exercises that you can do in between and around your push-up training to further improve them. But of course, like I mentioned before, they are not going to be the main priority. So if you want to get good at push-ups, do push-ups. But you can also do some of these small accessory movements to further improve those push-ups. For all of the push-up progressions, I would work between 5 and 10 repetitions, with the goal of achieving 8 to 10 repetitions before you move on to the next progression. Now of course, as the progressions become harder, the repetitions are going to get lower. But in the beginning, it's especially important to focus on high repetitions to build up that joint integrity. And like always, you want to do between 3 and 5 sets, depending on the intensity of the exercise and the sets that you are doing. There are many ways and methods that you can use to improve your push-ups in terms of the frequency, how you spread out your workouts, but that is something I'm going to cover in a future video, where we talk more about the programming aspect of gymnastics training. But for now, you could simply work on your push-ups 2 to 3 times per week. Start with the repetitions slow, and each week you want to gradually increase the repetitions, sets, or time under tension. And every 5 to 8 weeks you want to do a deload week, where you cut down some of the volume and then you get back on it, and gradually over time you are going to get stronger. Thank you so much for watching the second episode of my Gymnastics Foundation series. I really hope that you have enjoyed this episode and that you're going to be able to use some of these progressions, the techniques, and some of the methods that I have taught in this video. If you enjoyed today's video, then please hit that thumbs up button, comment down below, and subscribe if you haven't already. And next week I'm going to post the third episode of the Gymnastics Foundation series. So you might also want to hit that bell button so you are notified when I post the next episode. See you here, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.